My name is Diana Hawkins. I'm the Executive Director for the Hawthorne Neighborhood Council. With me today, as always, my good friend, Mr. Al McFarland, who will be moderating as always. Before we call on Al, Ann has two young ladies that we would like to introduce to the group. Ann?
We have one who's here now, and if Althegra comes on later, we'll introduce her as well. I want to introduce you all to Aviva Hillenbrand. She is the new Executive Director of Community Education for Minneapolis Public Schools. And one of her main jobs is to work on community schools. So I wanted to make sure you all know Aviva and get to meet her. And I'm going to ask her to just say a couple of quick words about her work and what they're doing over at Community Ed. So Aviva, go ahead.
Hi, good morning. Thank you so much. I haven't been called a young lady in quite a while, so I appreciate that. Maybe it cancels out some of the ma'ams that I get, right? So at Community Ed, our job is connecting the school district and the community. We have City View and Green, which are both, and Green Central, which are both community schools, which means that we essentially work with community partners to bring in services that are needed for families and students. So that could be mental health, it could be other supports that they need. We also bring out of school time programming for students. So it's a breadth of that, in addition to our enrichment that we do for adult and youth, our adult education. So that's our GED, ELL classes. And what am I missing? I'm missing something. Oh yeah, and our school age care program, Minneapolis Kids. So that is pretty much the scope of the work. And I'm excited to work with you guys, although my husband did just call and apparently he left his wallet in my car, so I have to run home. So it'll be a quick hi and goodbye, but thank you. Does anybody have any questions though?
Aviva, I'm really glad you could join us, and I look forward to seeing you at these huddles. And it's great to have you at the school. Thank you.
Okay, so before we turn it over to Al, I want to ask one quick favor, everybody. If you are not speaking, please, please, please mute yourself so we don't get the background noise. My friend, Mr. Al.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. What a morning it is. I think everybody's breathing deeply now, having watched on pins and needles the unfolding of the future of our community. And my reflection this morning to begin with is that no matter which side you came in on the critical questions on the ballot and on the critical candidates on the ballot, from my point of view, there are no losers. I think that whether you actually prevailed in the ballot or your position prevailed, your voice was heard. And so I think we're moving into an era, an arena where engagement is real, and where people are listening really, and where our voices, our lives matter for real. So for that, I want to commend all of us in neighborhood and community in our city, those who ran, those who won and lost. But I think nobody can walk away. I think everybody's here to say that together we become community. With that, it's always wonderful to be here together with the Hawthorne Huddle. In today's program, today's huddle, without exception, carries a tradition of being a robust community conversation. I want to begin, as we always do, with the COVID update. I'm going to ask Luisa Pessoa-Randall, who's the manager for epidemiology research and evaluation at Minneapolis Health Department, to give her report. Good morning, Luisa.
Good morning, Al. Thank you for having me. I want to start first with a bit of good news, which is that on Wednesday or yesterday, CDC, or late Tuesday night, CDC gave final approval for the Pfizer vaccine for 5 to 11-year-olds, and so for COVID-19, and so as of today, many places are starting to provide that immunization for children 5 to 11. The reason this is good news is that we have seen quite an increase in the number of cases in our school-aged kids, and particularly in that age group, since the beginning of the school year. And so just to give you an example, in Minneapolis, the numbers have been more than double what they were last year at this time in those aged 5 to 18 years of age in terms of the numbers of cases. So the vaccine will help with cutting down on transmission, and when young kids are not as susceptible to severe disease, but the issue is more that, if they are positive, then they are they are possible vectors to other members of their family, other members of the community who may be more susceptible to severe disease and hospitalization. So that is another step in hopefully being done with sort of this pandemic that we've been living with for the last year and a half, almost 2 years now. It'll be about 2 years later next month when the first cases were identified. On that, though, we are still seeing very high numbers in Minneapolis. In the state, the number, it appeared that we were slowing down, but I think we're having a little rebound, perhaps from the MEA weekend, for the schools being out for a few days for MEA. We had seen a decrease. We had gone below 100, an average of 100 cases per day. We are back above that, close to 115 cases per day. Even 90 cases per day is still very high. To give you just a difference, in June, when we had hit sort of our low, we were seeing about 6 cases per day on average. So obviously we want to go back there. We are hoping that the vaccine is one way in which we'll be able to get there, and so just encourage everyone to continue encouraging your friends, encouraging your family to get vaccinated, and continuing to take the precautions of masking and so physical distancing when indoors, to ensure transmission. We are continuing to see breakthrough cases. It is expected. The more you're looking, the rates are still about much different for those that are vaccinated compared to those that are unvaccinated in terms of the rate of infection. The more people we have that are vaccinated, the more likely it is that we're going to see some breakthrough cases, and that those numbers are going to be larger. But as we have good vaccination rates, hopefully, and we'll start to see decreases. We have great, for Minneapolis, I think we have about 80% of our 12 and older, or 84% of our 12 and older population having at least one dose of the vaccine, which is very good. And so now with the availability to 5 to 11, we'll see how quickly we can get that group going as well. But unfortunately, I wish I could come on and say, COVID is over, we're done. We're not going to be talking about it anymore, but we're a little bit away from that. But I hope that at some point I can come on and say that.
Thank you, Louisa. Any questions or comments, observations? Anybody feeling relief that kids can now get the vaccines? Diana, go ahead.
I was going to ask Louisa, have you seen or heard, is there any much resistance of the parents not wanting to get this age group vaccinated?
So, just as with the adults, there was some research that came out, I think, from the Kaiser Family Foundation. They did, a national survey, and there's about, I think, 25 to 30% of parents that are saying they're not going to get their children vaccinated. There's about 40% that are saying yes, right away. And then there's about 20% or so that are undecided, are going to do a little bit of a wait and see, and they're not sure. And then there's just some that are, are going to, but not right away, or need to have more conversations with their pediatricians or with their healthcare providers. And, I think, if you have questions, if you're a parent and you have questions, definitely, speak with trusted sources, speak with your pediatrician, speak with your healthcare provider, and try to get that information before you get your kid vaccinated. But we're hoping that we can continue to put out good information, and that as people see that maybe have seen their family members get vaccinated, then that will encourage them to also get their children vaccinated.
Luisa, at what point will this be a policy requirement, like other inoculations or vaccinations are for children to come to schools? Or will it become that?
I don't know. I could see it becoming that at some point. I think it would, the school, that's a policy that's developed at the state level. It's the Minnesota Department of Health and Minnesota Department of Education, and they will have to develop that policy. I think that I wouldn't expect that they would do that until all of the vaccines are, or at least the Pfizer, Moderna is on its way, and they're providing the data to FDA. But until it moves from an emergency use authorization to maybe full approval, as they've done with their 16 and older vaccine for Pfizer, which is now fully approved as opposed to emergency use authorization. So I could see once they're 12 to 16 and the 5 to 11 become fully authorized, that there might be some schools that will start doing that. I know there are some states already looking at that. I think that I thought I had read somewhere that a couple of school districts in California were looking at doing that, but I could see it becoming it has great, if someone is vaccinated, they don't need to quarantine. So it has impacts for kids being able to stay in school, and even when there is a case and an exposure.
Any other questions or comments?
Yes, I have a question.
Go ahead.
I know we're talking about the youth, but I heard that the booster shot for the Moderna had been approved. Is that true?
It is correct. Actually, there's booster shots have been approved for all vaccines. So Pfizer, Moderna, and Johnson & Johnson. And also it has been approved that you can get a booster shot that is different from the initial series that you received. So for example, if you got Johnson & Johnson, you can get a booster with either Pfizer or Moderna. If you got Moderna, you could get a booster with Pfizer or Johnson & Johnson. So you could mix and match. But yes, the booster for the Moderna has been approved. It is a half a dose compared to, you got, I think when you got the series of the Moderna, it was two 50 microgram doses, and the booster shot is a 25 microgram dose as opposed to a full dose. So you kind of get 2.5 vaccines. And for Moderna and Pfizer, the booster is anytime 6 months after the end of your series. For Johnson & Johnson, you can actually get a booster 2 months after you got the initial vaccine.
Great question. Sarah, you have a question or comment?
Hey, Al, I do have a question.
Oh, go ahead, Robbie.
I was just wondering if, are there any avenues that we're using right now to pass this information on to the community at this point?
So we have, the city has the avenues that they've used throughout the pandemic with some of the information that gets sent out to residents. But we also work we have some contracts with community organizations, trusted partners that they're providing the information. And I'm not as familiar with all of the work that goes into that. It's in a different part of the department, but I can get more information, but we are passing that out. We are also working with Minneapolis Public Schools to hold some vaccination clinics in the evenings, not next week, but the week after, and in a couple of the elementary schools and at the Davis Center, both in the evenings and weekends, for where the 5 to 11 vaccine will be available. And I know that information is being shared through Minneapolis Public Schools, and also it will be on the city website, and we'll be making those more public. But I can get you more information on, there's a different group in the department that deals with the communications and works with city communications. But I know that all along we've been working with community organizations to have the information available in different languages and to get it more into the communities, different communities in Minneapolis that may not access, let's say, the city website as easily or something like that.
Robbie, I can tell you that Insight News is one of a team of community-based, culturally framed communications initiatives that, as of November 1, is working on a contract with the health department to provide consistent and expansive COVID-19 awareness information. So starting next week in Insight News, you'll see a regular and hopefully massive ongoing documentation directed by the city, supporting communities and supporting families becoming aware and utilizing the mitigation and prevention strategies. So the department's doing a lot of great stuff, and we're proud to be part of it.
One
Thank you.
other thing we've done is participate in some of the radio shows that are with specific communities. I myself was on KMOJ answering questions, and the city has a couple of shows in different language stations. So there's one radio station, the La Casa, for Hispanic, Spanish-speaking listeners, KMOJ, and I can't remember the call signs for the Somali radio station, but also those.
KALY.
Yeah, and we have, we try to have individuals that are native speakers, so that conversation can happen, and people answer questions. So I know that there's a lot of efforts going into the communication side. I just am not as involved in developing those, but I can, put you in touch if you have other questions. I put my information on the chat, so Robbie, if you want to reach out, I can connect you with the person that's doing the communication side of things.
Perfect. Thank you.
Louisa, thank you so very, very much. Really appreciate the attention you guys are paying and your willingness to brief the community here every month. So thanks a lot. Let's move on to
My pleasure.
The next part on the agenda, and that is our safety report. As always, we're happy to have our friend and brother, Bill Magnuson, to talk about, and his colleagues from the 4th Precinct to talk about the safety report for the neighborhood. Bill.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. So for Hawthorne, for the month of October, there was 0 homicides, 0 rapes, 8 robberies, 21 aggravated assaults, 16 burglaries, 11 thefts, 10 auto thefts, 0 arsons, for a total of 56 Part 1 crimes. I'd like to remind everybody that a Part 1 crime is anytime there's a victim involved. And then I looked at the numbers for September, and there's a total of 47. So our biggest increases were in the aggravated assaults and the robberies and the auto thefts. We had 14 in September for aggravated assaults. Actually, robberies stayed about the same, but we only had 3 auto thefts as opposed to 10 in October. And I think everybody's been watching the news, and most of those robberies that are occurring had to do with Lyft and Uber drivers, and now they're it seems that same group of individuals is targeting ordinary citizens or residents with the same type of MO and method by stealing their property and their cars, like they were doing for the Lyft and Uber drivers. It's an ongoing investigation, and we have made some arrests in that. And unfortunately, some of those individuals are juveniles or young adults. And if there's a juvenile, that usually means that they're not going to be held down at the JDC for that type of crime, and because of the COVID and some other stuff. And so they're not, they usually get let out then. And unfortunately, in some cases, they go on to commit more crimes and robberies. So we're trying to stay on top of it. We've made some arrests, and hopefully we'll get it tamped down and under control pretty soon. Does anybody have any questions?
What typically can we expect in the holiday season coming up? as the weather changes colder. Is colder mean safer, number one? Or does colder mean more opportunity to be victimized if people are thinking that we're getting gifts delivered to our houses, or that people are buying things for holiday purposes, et cetera? What do you think?
Well, I think that we're going to see a decrease in some type of crimes like we typically do. And then we're also going to see an increase in other crimes like we typically do. Like you touched on, one of them, Al, is that when we get towards the holiday season, we're going to be doing a lot of online shopping because that's what we've been doing anyway, because it's more convenient and it's, you know, safer. We don't have to go out to the stores and like that. We can do it from the comfort of our home. We have them delivered. But unfortunately, that means that other people are going to be cruising our neighborhoods looking for packages when we're not home and stuff. So what we usually do and typically do is we usually try to send out some type of a warning where we can have them, either you can have it delivered to the 4th precinct, you can pick it up there because that's a community house, in my opinion. That belongs to the community, or you can have it delivered to other ones, or else have a trusted neighbor to pick up your package if you're not going to be home to do that. And so we're going to see an increase probably in some package thefts, which is me qualified as a theft. And then we're also probably going to see an increase in auto theft as well, because what happens is that when it gets colder, we want to get into our warmer car when we go to work, right? So what do? We go out there, we start it, we warm up and come back in, we finish having a cup of coffee, brush our teeth. And then it gives an opportunity for somebody to come along and get an easy access to a ride, right? So they usually get in the car and take off with it. So we're going to see an increase in that. So what we try to do is try to say, you know, it's easier to basically just get in a cold car and go to work rather than just get in a warm car. It's more convenient because you at least have your car, right? So you don't lose it. And then when it comes to the other crimes, we're probably going to see a decrease in some narcotic activity. That's not really a part 1 crime. We're going to see a decrease in that. We're going to see a decrease in some of these other types of crimes because when it gets colder, nobody wants to be hanging out outside, correct? Right? So it's a even flow. So we're going to see an increase, uptick in some crimes and a decrease in other crimes. So we don't really want to qualify weather as an indicator of how the crime rate's going to go because it's a fluid situation.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? Okay. Well, Bill, thank you. And once again, on behalf of all the community.
I'm sorry. I couldn't get my phone. My mute's off, but I do have a question for Bill.
Go ahead. Sure.
Are you all considering other methods for those youth that you say because of the COVID and because of their age, that they're more or less getting a slap on the wrist and being released when they're committing these crimes? Are you considering other ways of letting them know or holding them or detaining them to say, hey, this is not okay, so that they're not saying, hey, all we're going to get is a slap on the wrist and you go out and you do it again and then it progresses, as you say, onto other things? Are we taking other measures?
Well, I don't know about that because that's not really something that we can do. The police department's not really involved in that stuff. The reason that they're being released is because the police department has no jurisdiction or no say in how the JDC, the Juvenile Detention Center, runs the show down there. We just take them down there and they'll check them in and they can either release them or they hold them. And it's not really up to us. It's more of the county attorney's issue and then more of how they do business. And so before the pandemic and before some budget cuts were made to us, we had some units that could address some of that stuff. Like we had the Police Activities League where we can divert some of those individuals to that type of environment and positive role models with police officers. Like for instance, the inspector's brother, Tony Adams, used to head that and did a phenomenal job. And unfortunately, and good for him, but unfortunately for us, we lost him. He's now the head of security for the Minnesota Timberwolves. So he got a nice job offer, and you can't fault him for taking that, right? So we don't have that unit anymore. But one of the things that we want to do is moving forward and how we're going to, build back trust in the community and build back relationships. We want to bring that unit back in the fold, and so we can have that unit. We can divert some of these troubled youth to those using it. You give them positive role models and positive mentors, right? And then one of the things that we can also utilize, if it's possible, is that we just last month, I think we had the Big Brothers and Big Sisters who are new community partner to the Hawthorne neighborhood. We can divert some of those troubled youth to them if we're able to do that. But for us to come up with alternatives, it's not really something that we can do. We don't have the jurisdiction to do that. That's the county attorney and that's the JDC. So Hopefully moving forward, we get back up to building trust in the community. We get back to reforming our police department to where we get the right candidates in there, the right people in there to partner with the communities that we're serving. And then we can move forward and, build up and build better.
Say, Bill, I think there's a lot of places to divert kids. So my question for you is, in this new environment, who do I talk to?
I think the first step is talking to either the JDC or the county attorney, because they're the ones responsible for either making the decision whether they're not going to hold them or they're going to hold them. And I think that, and then maybe partner up with Hennepin County Probation and the juvenile division over there too. That would be my first guesses and first steps that I would do.
Thank you, Bill. I will make some phone calls and see what I can do to perhaps provide them with the resource list or bring some people together that they can talk to about how to divert to other programs. There's lots of them. Most of them are really hurting for funding, but I think there's some ways this could be done without, even if the police don't reinvigorate PAL and some of those other things. There are other places. I would, for example, talk to our friend on this call, Sarah Rossman, too, about the park. So I think there's some places that can happen. So I will have a conversation with them. Thanks, Bill.
Yeah, and I would like to add too, and as well as I do too, that some of these individuals that are out there committing these crimes are suffering from some, the type of trauma that they've all experienced too. Yes. And I think that we can't just, use a term where they might be better suited locked up someplace. But also, if we do that, they can't be basically just, warehouse somewhere. They need programs, they need services, right. And they need somewhere to where they can address some of that trauma and some of that stuff they're experiencing. So I think that's got to be a part of the conversation too, moving forward, how we're going to address that and how we're going to help them.
Locking them up is not going to help.
No, I agree with you 100%.
And so, Bill, I agree with you too. So anyway, good conversation, and I'll do some phone calls and start talking to a few people and see what we might be able to shake loose here. Thank you, Bill. That was very helpful. Thank you, Bill.
Tasca, and then Susima.
Good morning, everyone. I wanted to add to that. I'm Tasca Welters. I work with Hennepin County Department of Corrections. And I want to say there are two avenues or two areas where you guys can get involved. If you want to talk about that, I would say there is a Youth Juvenile Justice Council now that replaced the Juvenile Detention Alternative Initiative. So it consists of, we have judges, county attorney, as well as public defenders and community stakeholders and nonprofit organizations, and Youth Voice a part of that committee. And the other one is our Eliminating Racial Disparities Committee. So that's where I know I've been privy to some of those conversations concerning this. And having worked in the past with JDAI, I know that when they decide to release kids or to confine them, it's based on a risk assessment. Which gives them points that determine based on how many times they've come in contact with our system, environmental factors, school attendance, and all of that. So, so that's how, I'm just giving you just to the point on how those decisions are determined.
Susima.
Yeah, thank you for the great conversation. And I appreciate hearing these updates about safety as like a Hawthorne resident, but also from the perspective of a resident. I'm wondering about what are the long-term approaches to safety? Like what are the proactive approaches or programs that we can get kids involved in, get families involved in, to take a proactive approach to safety so that, we can help address the trauma early on. We can help, mitigate some of the impacts of poverty. I guess I'm just wondering, as someone who's fairly new to the Hawthorne resident, what are proactive approaches to safety?
Bill or Ann or Diana?
I think one of the things that we had before moving forward, and I think one of the reasons that we saw an uptick, especially with our youth, is the proactive approaches that we had were like where they were in schools, right? Before the pandemic, they were going to school and they were in school and they were learning and doing good. And one of the other things that we had, especially in the Hawthorne neighborhood, was Falwell Park was open, right? And we had the Boys and Girls Club that was open, the YMCA was open, we had youth and rec centers that were open. And Hawthorne, Falwell Park had a program for all types of activities. They had sports, they had dance, they had some music stuff that the kids were able to do. And so when the pandemic hit, those parks and all those other things and everything, like everything else, they closed down because of the pandemic. And we haven't got those parks are still open, like the sports are back up and running, but you still don't have all the other activities in the parks, and you still have all the other activities involved with the youth. So I think that we have to be cognizant of the fact that we have to get healthy, we have to beat this pandemic, and then we can get back to normal. And I think once we get back to normal, we're going to have some of these activities to address some of these, for these youth to come to and feel safe and be themselves while they're not out there. Because that old adage, and I believe it's true, is idle hands are the devil's workshop, right? And we've seen it come to fruition with the closing of all these youth centers and all these activities that they had. And now they're out there, they don't know what to do. So what are they doing? They're causing trouble. And it's unfortunate. And it's not really their fault. I don't think it's their fault. I think that they have to have somewhere to where they can be positive and address themselves and, you know, be themselves and express themselves in a positive atmosphere.
Bill, you are exactly right. And I'm going to say this. We have seen a decrease in funding for after-school programming for many years now. The YCB received $1 million from the City Council to disperse for programs for young people. We got 47 proposals, and I was just trying to look up the amount, but I can't quite find it, that it equals over $30 million of requests. All of those proposals are worthy. We can't fund them all. There needs to be more money in the system so that our young people have things to do in which they are connected to adults, in which they are with young people, in which they are learning things and having fun. And so I'm just going to tell you that that was going to be a major focus of the YCB, is to try to find more ways to get funding in the system, because that is a huge problem. The children have nothing to do. So they're out there finding stuff to do. And some of the kids do stuff that we're very proud of, and some of them we think, but they don't have the help. So I just want to say, I think that is a major issue. And I want to just take this second to insert one thing, which is that Diana's son, Byron, does outreach for the YCB and does a fantastic job. And he was highlighted in the Star Tribune this weekend for his drum corps work. And and the kids that go into that, man, those kids, they have something to do. It's a great adult that they work with. They work with other kids. So if you haven't read the article, read it. It's so great. It's so great. So I feel like Diana's his mom and she gets to be proud, but he works for me and I'm really proud of him. So we need more of that.
Absolutely.
Al, if I may add, this was a great conversation. There's so much that needs to be done. There's still a lot of work to be done around this pieces. I feel like we have a lot of programs out there, but we're not all talking to each other. And I think that we need to tie these programs together and come up with something that is robust, that's going to help these kids, instead of, you know, there needs to be some lesson in a sense that, okay, if you go this route, this is what's going to happen, but here's where we can give you an avenue to be better. But I think most of the kids that I talk to, that I interact with, is that I feel that sometimes they don't have money, they don't have the next meal, and so they do little things that they feel they can get away with just to get these necessity that they need, right? Mm-hmm. So can we create, maybe this is a bigger discussion in a way where we can, if there's a kid that did something that, and we police pick them up, can we tie them to a program, but also give them some sort of an incentive that they can able to eat, they can able to get through the next couple of days or get through the next month while they're in a program to better themselves. Because you can't just say, let's put them into a program. The problem still exists where they don't have food for the next month or 3 months, whenever it is program, to get themselves better. So it is a bigger issue, and it does require a lot more collaboration and a lot more conversation into it to come up with something that is going to work, that's going to motivate them to do the things that they want to do as well.
Well, this is a great conversation. I'm going to call it because we're going to move the agenda. But Bill, thank you for being the point on this. And thanks to all of you for your questions and your comments. I'm going to turn it over now to Diana for the next part of the program.
Thanks, Al. Sarah, can you put your question that you had in the chat, please, and we'll make sure that it get answered from Bill?
I was actually just going to share park stuff since we were talking about, but I can share that, you know, when you want me to.
I'll call you at the end for the announcements. How about that? And then
Perfect.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Okay, so here's
Everyone, I'm just gonna have to say that speaking of youth, I gotta get mine to school, so
Yeah.
I'm gonna have to leave early. So
Bye,
thank you
Bill.
for having me, and I will see everyone next month.
All right, bye,
Thank you,
Bill.
Bill.
Thank you. So this is my favorite part, and I'm just wondering if everyone could please turn their camera on, because this month we have 2 honorees, and both of these organizations are very near and dear to my heart. And who am I going to talk about first? I think Ann has. I can't hear you.
I am on mute as I was instructed. Diana, you can do either one. I'm ready for
Okay.
you, whatever.
Let's talk about my good friend, Mr. Ravi in US Bank. I met Ravi about maybe 10, 12 years ago. We was on the West Broadway board. He still sits there on that board. And before Ravi came to this bank, US Bank really wasn't doing anything with the neighborhood. And he got involved. And I can honestly say that since he's been there, I have seen US Bank come around. They have helped a lot more people in the community. They stuck around when George Floyd happened. So, Mr. Ravi, can you just please share with us a little bit about US Bank and yourself and the community? And I applaud you. I just really want to applaud you because, like I said, it's not often that a bank like that would come back and then really give to the community.
Well, thank you, Diana. I'm honored also to be recognized for this, but I think the work continues. For me, this started 12 years ago when I moved into North Minneapolis from Brooklyn Center, and I wanted to invest my time and really do something that is meaningful and impactful. And I live in North Minneapolis, about 5 blocks away from the branch, and my focus was really to how can I make a change? How can I make a difference in my work? I need to have purpose in my job, or else it's just not fulfilling for me. And I find that within my capacity, I will continue to do as much as I can to support this community, which I am a part of. So I work, live, play in North Minneapolis. But also, what can I do different? How can I continue to push the barrier to advocate for not only this community, but small business owner in the community, or how do I share my knowledge? How do I share the things that I've learned throughout the years to help educate and continue to look for ways to support individuals. The decision about US Bank continue to stay, well, this basically came from our CEO. That was the first week when this all happened. He reassured me that we're not moving, we're staying, we're going to continue. And I've asked for a temporary spot, which we operate out of a mobile unit to continue to serve our customers. We then moved from after the first snowstorm, I believe that was October 20th or August 20th of last year. Is it August or October? Somewhere around that area, but October, I believe, yes. And then we moved to a small room right in the damaged location just to continue that service while the new location was getting rebuilt. The focus was really, if we're going to rebuild and we're going to rebuild back better, how do we incorporate the community? How do we utilize the local business within our community to rebuild back? So I was able to bring a few of my customers, business customers, to the table. I was excited to see that Construction, there were some partners that basically have a hand in rebuilding all our damaged branch within the Twin Cities and Lake Street. So that was a win, not only for our community, but that was a big win for me in a sense that that was a proud moment for me, knowing that we're able to connect with the locals and able to do things in a positive way, rebuild back better with using our local talent. So those were some great moments for me. I think just going back to 2019, one of my initiative with our councilman at the time, I had met him at Sammy's and wanted to do, he was having a housing forum where he wants to push a lot more homeowners in North Minneapolis. And that's the time when the topic really came up about gentrification. And my commitment in 2019 was to really take a deep dive into how do we convert a lot of our owners, renters in North Minneapolis, make them homeowners. And that was the year that I basically closed 30 mortgages with North Minneapolis residents that were renters. And that was another proud moment for me. But again, that work still needs to continue. Still need the word to spread within the community that they're still able to own a property rather than rent, because you're not really creating any generational wealth that way if you're renting. But a lot needs to be done over the years. I've partnered with Diana, both also with Al. We've had this discussion many times. I've been in talks with Babington Johnson, Reverend Babington Johnson, and also Mr. Spike Moss, which most of you know as well. So yes, I'm honored to be here. I'm really appreciative to be a part of this as well. Great conversation with this forum. So look forward for more.
Thank you, Rob. Okay, so now our next honoree, I just have to tell you a little bit about the person. I met Mr. Matt, almost 20 years ago. Matt and I was one of those, I sat on the cookie cart board when Sister Jean had the kids on the corner. And I always had the conversation with her. And I think you remember this, Al. We got to get these kids in the building. You remember that?
Yep.
Little red building that sat there. And I met Matt when I sat on the cookie cart board. And he started doing things. And I'm just amazed because he took these kids, and not only do they have one bakery, but they have two. So just imagine, just look at this plaque. Here are 6 of the youth. They are going to be our leaders one day. They're learning a skill. So Matt, I just have to applaud you. Sister Jean, she's near and dear to me. I have to applaud her, but I've never met a person like you that just came into North Minneapolis and took over. So I'm gonna let Matt have a few words as well.
Unmute Matt, yeah.
Thank you, Diana. Thank you, everybody. What an honor, and really Cookie Cart's success and being deserving of this award has very, very little to do with me and everything to do with the strength of the North Minneapolis community and even more so the strength of the young people who are just so ripe and ready for an opportunity. And, you know, I was smiling when you all were talking about, oh, wouldn't it be great if we just had a program where people could come get a sense of belonging, where they could earn enough to get some of those basic immediate needs met, where they could connect with positive adults. And that's what we do. And it's a magic formula. And I want to support other organizations and being able to use those elements of Cookie Cart's model, because it's very powerful to be awarded for the learning that you're doing. We just had an annual fundraising event, and we created a video for it that one of the most amazing stories and moving presentations that I've seen about Cookie Cart. We actually have a young leader who came up from being in the Cookie Cart program to being what we call a cart captain, to the next step, what we call a bakery assistant. And now Zuri is actually the manager, the face of the North Minneapolis Bakery. So the video was about her story, but not only Zuri's story. Her dad was a cookie cart kid, probably about back in Diana's time. I think he was 6 or 7 years old when he was out with that cart. So the video was Zuri interviewing her dad, and during the interview, she surprised him by pulling out the old cart that he used to push around. It's just such an honor to be part of an organization that is so deeply ingrained in the fabric of North Minneapolis and that is truly making a difference, thanks to amazing young people and the support of this community. Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, Matt. Al, before I turn it over to you, I want to do one more thing that we haven't done. And Miss Victoria, can you just raise your hand? I just want everybody to know that Victoria is the new chair of the Hawthorne Neighborhood Council. So get to know who Victoria is, I just want to do that. So now, Al, I'm going to turn it back over to you so we can jump on with our exciting main topic.
Great. Well, let me say thanks and kudos to you, Diana, and to Anne for Hawthorne and YCB for doing this significant and important recognition. If we don't recognize each other, nobody's going to. And so it's so important that we have done this, and these two individuals and their organizations deserve it. And so I'm pleased that we have done this. Thank you for making it happen. I want to say an extra word here about my friend Ravi Singh. He's absolutely right when he talked about his commitment to engaging local businesses and developing local businesses. So I brag in the marketplace about my banker. And when I'm saying that, I'm talking about Ravi Singh. He's my banker, my company's banker, my business's banker. And I know that I'm both in good hands. He's a fair and principled advisor, banker, and partner in our business and in the community. So Ravi, thank you. Kudos to you again. And Cookie Cart, you said it all, Matt. You guys are great because you are the future and you're bringing that infusion of possibility, entrepreneurship, and responsibility for our children. So great. Well, let's move on. We've got a great next part of the program. It's important because things are shifting. And right now, we want to give you an update on the Metro Blue Line LRT extension project timeline. Talk about the MTC's anti-displacement initiative and some special upcoming November Minneapolis workshops. Pleased to present Dan Solar, who is with Hennepin County Transit Construction, and Sam O'Connell, who's Metro Transit Assistant Director for Community Affairs. I'm turning the mic over to you guys, and thank you so much for being here.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Sam O'Connell with the Met Council, Metro Transit, and I am joined by Dan Solar, who's my colleague over at Hennepin County. So Dan, if you can give a wave so everybody can see who you are.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
We are also joined by our colleague, Joan Van Holla, who has been kind enough to run the slides for us this morning for your discussion, presentation, Q&A for us. We're excited to be here. Thank you so much. Thank you for letting us be in your virtual community this morning. Very impressive to hear all of the good work from Cookie Cart. Obviously, we love them, and obviously hearing about the investments that Ravi and his team are making. And just want to talk a little bit about when we think about the Blue Line extension. So it's the extension of the current blue line, we are also thinking about this as being an investment in community that serves community as well. So I hope that is something that we leave with you today to think about how this investment can also serve community. Dan and I have a few slides this morning, but we are really interested in the conversation as well. I will apologize upfront. My schedule unfortunately doesn't allow me to be with you all for the whole conversation today, but I know you're going to be in good hands with Dan and Joan. So we're going to just share with you our project timeline, where we are, and as Mr. McFarland said, we do have some upcoming opportunities to really deeply engage, and then take your questions. So with that, Joan, we can move to the next slide, please. So I just wanted to share with folks where we are today. For many years, we were working on a project, I think most folks know, and very, very hard starting in 2015, when the council started working on designing the project. So the original project, as most folks I think understood, left Target Field Station, headed down Olson Memorial Highway, then connected within the Burlington Northern Santa Fe Railroad. And we were in that railroad right of way for 8 miles, but it also allowed us to serve the communities of Golden Valley and Robbinsdale, Crystal, and then we kind of got out of the railroad right of way, and we were able to serve the community of Brooklyn Park. We tried for many years to get to an agreement with the Freight Railroad. It just unfortunately never happened, and that's everything from sitting down to negotiations, kind of like literally just trying to think of them as a good community partner, and that this is something they'd want to do, to obviously trying to make the deal happen with additional money, just never came together. So Hennepin County and Met Council just said, we can't do this anymore. We're not serving our community when we're in these protracted negotiations. We're not seeing an end in sight. So last August, we did take a turn, and hopefully folks were aware of that turn, where we said we needed to look at different routes, alignments, and ways to serve our community. And that also allowed us an opportunity to kind of connect through North Minneapolis in a more impactful way. So that's where we started our work back in August of last year. This March, we released some initial routes to begin to think a little bit about what those routes could be, where they can go. So I think some folks have seen what they look like on West Broadway, and then the Lowry Washington route to get us into downtown and connect with the existing Blue Line extension. Then in July this year, we through community feedback, we identified potential station locations. And as we're kind of working through this November, is we're coming back and we're bringing some more refinement and details as to where those stations could be, what does the alignment look like, how do we work with the existing traffic network, and how do we serve community. So I just wanted to give folks a little bit of an overview of that. At the macro sense. And Joan, if we can move to the next slide, just want to share with folks where we'll be. Thank you. So we're kind of starting out on that left-hand side of where we are, where our hope is by the end of this year and early next, we'll be in the process of identifying a community-supported route. So our task is to make sure we're engaging with all of our community members to understand what alignment, whether it's the Lowry, Washington, or West Broadway alignment, really serves our community, kind of fits the best in that, and really makes sense and is connected to the visions that community members have for the community. That's where we are right now. Once that alignment is identified, we'll go into much deeper environmental review and engineering. So that is really kind of a lot of the design and engineering and where we actually place the stations and locations. We do more of our environmental work with that. We will also be seeking municipal consent. So that is the opportunity for the cities to basically approve the design as put forward. And if not, let us know what is it that is preventing them from doing that. And that allows us to have that conversation. Ideally, we'd go into construction, and that takes about 3 to 4 years. As folks are maybe aware of some of the construction that we're doing currently on the Southwest LRT line or the Central Corridor line or Hiawatha, it's not construction that is done intensely in front of businesses or residents for the whole 3 or 4 years. We kind of move through the corridor, we do different things, but essentially from kind of the beginning to the end, it's about 3 or 4 years. But then the goal is to have a line that's open for service by 2028. So that's really sharing at a very high level of where we are in the project and how much more time we have to really get this right, to really have it make sense for community members. I would also say that one thing that our project team heard very deeply, very loudly, is the work that I'll highlight on the next slide, Joan, if we can move forward, is the work to make sure we're not displacing anybody. So as Robbie was talking about making those investments, right? Making where we can support people transitioning from renters to home ownership. We also want to do that as part of the project in the sense of keeping folks where they live, where they work, where they have their businesses. So part of our technical work will continue, as I outlined. Also in this is also developing a work group with our community members, with other organizations, with state agencies, with Hennepin County, with the Met Council, and help us lead us through that conversation and navigate it. So navigate the conversation to make sure we're doing right by the community and we're not displacing anybody, both on the residential side and both on the business side as well. So we have contracted with CURA, the Center for Urban and Regional Affairs, and particularly the project manager, C. Terrence Anderson, who I think folks probably know, who's also going to lead us through that process. This is the first time we are bringing in anti-displacement work into a project of this size because we understand how transformative it can be. We also understand that there are also issues with these type of large projects. So we want to build that into our DNA early. So I wanted to share with you that this is something we're also working on. We want to be working with community deeply in this work. That's just upcoming with us, but also we see as a conversation as we continue our design. So until we get to cutting that ribbon and providing that service, this is also work that will be engaged in, and even after that. So to help us, we need your ideas, we need your thoughts, and we want you to stay with us on this conversation. So Jonah, if we can move to the next slide, we do have a series of upcoming community workshops, and they are workshops. They're not meetings just for us to sell this project to you. What we really want to do is hear your thoughts about it. What do you like about it? What don't you like about it? How do you see it serving your community, serving you, serving the visions that that community members have worked so hard on? So we have both in-person and actual virtual sessions as well. So you see the list here up on the screen. We are also offering office hours, so just drop by. Not everybody, we get it, can make the meetings, the workshops. Just drop by when you can. We are also hosting a lot of this information on our website. So I will put that in the chat so everybody's got that information as well. This is, I will warn you, this is a lot of technical information. So it might take a couple of times to really understand and digest it. It's a lot for us as we're on the project team and we're working on it. So feel free to connect with us. I know you're going to have questions. That's what Dan and I and Joan are here for, and our whole team is really to support you through this, the conversation and the decision making. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Dan, and when Dan is finished, we'll be happy to take any of your questions.
Thanks, Sam. And I apologize, everybody. I know I sound a little off. I have a cold, so I have a little congestion, but hopefully folks will be able to understand me. Very happy to be here this morning. Both Sam and I have been involved with building an extension to the Blue Line LRT route from that currently today runs from the Mall of America and the airport on the south end up to downtown Minneapolis. We've been working on extending that through the communities of Minneapolis, Robbinsdale, Crystal, and up into Brooklyn Park for many years. And so where we are now sets us back to a design process to look at and determine a route alternative that does not utilize the Burlington Northern Railroad. So in doing that, we've been working both, or really in three communities, in Crystal and Robbinsdale, to look at how LRT might work along Highway 81 from North Memorial Hospital up north through Robbinsdale and Crystal. And in Minneapolis, really looking at two primary routes, and I'm going to show you those on a map on the next slide. Two primary routes that could bring us from Target Field Station, right right at Target Field in downtown Minneapolis up to the Robbinsdale, Minneapolis border, or essentially where North Memorial Hospital is. And this map that's on the screen, and I know it's not super detailed, but it'll give a sense of where these routes are. We've broken down these two routes into various sections, and really what we're talking about here is a West Broadway route, which you see in green, which really runs from Target Field Station out of downtown, heads over I-94, and then runs north and south along Lyndale Avenue between Plymouth and West Broadway. So north and south there, and then runs really east-west and north-south from Lyndale and West Broadway up to the Robbinsdale border. So really along West Broadway, in front of a number of spots we talked about today, in front of Cookie Cart, in front of the US Bank branch that's on Broadway and Emerson, and along many other businesses and residential properties along that route. That essentially, sorry. Let me also mention that you'll see some blue spaces in here. That's where we, through engagement over the summer, have identified likely station areas. So on West Broadway, that would be along and near Penn. It would be somewhere in the Emerson Fremont area, and it would be down near Lyndale and Plymouth. That those would be 3 station areas. The purple route identifies another alternative, one that would kind of wind through downtown with a stop near the North Loop, kind of around Washington and Plymouth, or in general in that area. Head north and south along Washington Avenue with a stop at West Broadway, maybe a stop up near Lowry, where the Upper Harbor Terminal piece is, and then essentially run east-west along Lowry with a station at Emerson Fremont and a station in and around Penn. So these two routes are really what we want the focus of these workshops to be. We've identified and worked with community about where routes make sense. These are the two. We've identified and worked with community over the summer about where stations would go. These are identified. So now what we want to bring out are much more detailed plans about station design and where turn lanes would go and how building LRT would fit in to these various corridors, with alternatives in each of the two corridors that show, you'll see the area here, right, with a couple of green lines right between Lyndale and Irving on West Broadway. We've got a number of alternatives that show how we can use West Broadway and 21st to build LRT through that area. So there's multiple alternatives. Like we say, they show different challenges, different opportunities, different right-of-way acquisitions, different impacts. And then the hope would be, not the hope, but the actuality will be that once we gather all this feedback together, we'll start to make a recommendation towards which of these routes would make the most sense to advance an LRT extension through North Minneapolis. Joan, go ahead and go back one slide. I want to talk a little bit about more where we are in the design process. The purpose of these workshops, like this shows, is to show how LRT fits into the community, where stations would go, and how it would kind of all fit together. This will lead us then to preparing a draft and then the final recommendation for how this route would extend through, and where we would recommend as the route to move forward through the long federal process that Sam had up on an earlier slide to move forward. So where can people get this information? Where can they look at these drawings? Where can they see this stuff? Clearly, on the slide we had before this one, Joan, people have this in their chat. We showed the virtual workshops and the in-person workshops and the office hours that we'll have. And then on slide 9, I think we show that the drawings are available beginning tomorrow, and you'll be able to look at all these drawings in detail online. If that's your desire, you can click on this, move through that. You can comment directly on the design option. You can do all of that. You can also look at these in PDF format at our bluelineextension.org website. So this has been a long year's worth of work to come from. It was a little over a year ago when we made the decision to say we can't extend the LRT alignment up the railroad. We're not going to get a deal with them. Let's come back and see if we can't find a route that works through North Minneapolis into Robbinsdale, Crystal, and Brooklyn Park to not only bring a transportation improvement to the community, but to also bring an ability to, add that additional mobility into some pretty significant neighborhoods where we think this investment is warranted. But not only just to do it, but to do the transportation improvement coupled with an anti-displacement alternative, so that we're building an LRT line not through the community of North Minneapolis, but for the community, with the community, to be part of the community, and not like other transportation projects that maybe have happened in the past that divided the community. But how can we do this with and for Northside residents? And that's really been our mantra for the last year as we've extended this project. So before I take some connection or some questions, we can put the next slide up. There's lots of ways to stay connected with us. Signing up for the Gov Delivery project update is a very good way to do that. There's not a lot of email updates, but there's enough to tell people here's key things that are coming up. We have meetings all the time. We have people out in the community right now today, meeting with business owners along both West Broadway and Lowry to get ready for these workshops. And of course, our Twitter page, Facebook page, this project website, bluelineext.org, is really a good place to gather a lot of information. So there's our background today, very simple, but also a huge undertaking that has a lot of years ahead of it in terms of pulling this project forward, but one we're really excited about working on. So Al, I think I turn it back to you.
Yep,
Happy to
yep.
take questions, comments
Sure.
that can come in the chat, or people can ask them directly.
Great presentation, first of all, and thank you for this important update. It looks like a bright future is ahead. My question is, what are we losing with having made the decision last year to not go with the previous, failed negotiation? What are we giving up by changing our focus to these two possibilities?
There's a couple things we're losing, Al. That's a great question. Obviously, we're losing time, right? I mean, we would have been close. Had we been able to be successful with the railroad, we might be under construction today. And so we're losing time where we would be maybe under construction now, we're backwards. We're losing the momentum we gained. We were going to go down Highway 55 and we were going to have a station at 55 and Bryant over by Summit OIC. We were going to have a station at 55 and Penn. Obviously, we're losing that connection by not being able to go to the railroad. Heading up the railroad alignment, we were going to go along Theodore Wirth Regional Park. We were going to have a station at Plymouth. We were going to have a station at Golden Valley Road. So we're losing those kind of four areas of focus on the alignment. And what we're gaining, of course, is now we're gaining the ability to look at some different areas. So yes, we were losing, one of the things we were going to do, and this is a big part primarily for the Harrison neighborhood, is we were going to essentially reconstruct all of Highway 55 between I-94 and Theodore Wirth Park, which is really in need of some work. And that was going to be part of the project, that we were going to reconstruct that. Without that, we're now working with NDOT and other entities to look at how we still might be able to make improvements to Highway 55 without the LRT project. But this will now allow us to turn our focus into other areas in North Minneapolis. So that's a good point, Al. We are certainly losing some things while we're gaining others.
Last question for me. What is the potential impact on density? The concept of transit-oriented development is at play, obviously. And what I look at when I look over in South Minneapolis or elsewhere, University Avenue, how these neighborhoods have just built up lots of people. And what North Minneapolis needs, I believe, is more people. What impact will these decisions have on boosting and building the population and therefore the economy of North Minneapolis?
Al, another really good question, and what it lends to is that lends to how all of us work together as partners, right? So Hennepin County and Met Council come to this table because Met Council and Metro Transit owns transit. Hennepin County funds a lot of transit. And so we bring that improvement, but also at the table are folks from, say, Hennepin County's Community Works group, certainly our city partners at CPAD and other areas that will do things, Al, like look at what's called station area planning, where they'll start to look at what are land use decisions that we want to make both along the alignment and along the station areas where this gets built. And how does an LRT project being built in any of these areas lend towards changes in land use and zoning to allow for or make changes to to the existing. Some, and that'll all be fairly community supported as well. So it may, in some areas, increase density. It may, in some areas, keep density the same. One of the things we really want to make sure of, though, is when we talk about an anti-displacement working group effort, we're talking about making those land use changes in cooperation with the community, so that even if we do change to more density, we don't change to more density by moving people that are here today out, right, and not creating gentrification, which is no easy task, but it's one that has a strong focus for us as we move this forward.
Victoria.
Yes, I hope I'm not asking the wrong thing at the wrong time. But you not being able to go through with the railroad, is it because those communities did not want this in their community, or going?
Victoria, great question. And the answer is absolutely not. We had the Harrison neighborhood and Minneapolis on board with the 55 alignment. We had the city of Golden Valley and the Minneapolis Park Board and the Minneapolis community there. I mean, that alignment was well supported locally. No questions about getting it built there. The issue becomes that building LRT on a railroad alignment next to an existing freight rail, the railroad has the final say on whether that can happen or not. And we do not have, the government does not have condemnation authority or eminent domain over railroads, and just they did not see this in their best interest to share their property to build this line. And so our ability to move forward on the railroad alignment died. And so to that effect, I mean, Golden Valley is very, they're understanding, they get it. But they took a leap of faith to, bring LRT there. And now their focus is more on what about some kind of a bus rapid transit project on 55 or something like that for transit service in our community. So no, it was about the ability for government, Met Council, county, state, to agree with the railroad on using the property, and that just couldn't happen.
A few minutes more for questions and answers. Any more questions and questions or comments? Okay. Well, listen, again, Dan, thank you so much. And thank you to your team. And we'll be anxiously waiting and watching and supporting the movement on this project.
Well, and thanks to all of you. And if you're business owners that are along here, reach out to us and we're happy to visit with you. If you're residents along these areas, we're happy to, we have outreach staff out and about all the time. Joan's got a team made up of many members and an outreach cohort that we have, as well as many others. And we're happy to visit, come to the workshops, come ask questions, look at the drawings, and help us get a positive, great improvement through North Minneapolis.
Thank you. Thank you. I'll turn it over now to Diana for the last part of the program. Diana?
Before I do that, I see Latrice has her hand up.
Oh, sorry.
Let's do that real quick, that one question, and then we'll move on. No problem. Go ahead.
Thank you, Diana. Good morning. I I realize that I don't know information that I guess is a perfect time for me to ask. With the light rail and the proposed routes, the streets will have to widen, right? The streets will have to widen, and some homes may have to not be in that path, or like to allow for the streets to widen, or businesses would have to allow for the street to widen. I guess I do want to know if, and maybe I should come to a workshop and ask this question, but is that in general what would happen to a neighborhood when a light rail comes through it? Will the streets have to widen, and buildings that are in the way have to move?
So Latrice, that's a great question, and it's in general. So it's not a simple answer, because one of our principles was to find a way to develop this project without acquiring a lot of property. And so the street doesn't always have to widen with LRT, but the street has to change. So in other words, where there's on-street parking, most of that on-street parking would go away. Where there's spots where there's 2 lanes north and 2 lanes south along West Broadway or Washington, we would have 1 lane in each direction. So we would change the street where we could and put LRT on it, and therefore through lots of areas, we don't need to acquire additional property and the LRT will fit. Where we need to build left turn lanes at specific spots, because there are traffic signals and we have to build left turn lanes, where we have to build a station for the LRT, there the street will have to widen. And in some cases, that's not a big deal. There's a parking lot there. The street can widen a little bit. We take some of the parking. In some cases, the buildings are right on the property line. And so widening even a couple of feet might mean we have to purchase that residence, business. Now that changes based on where we move things around, and that's why we have the alternatives. So the whole purpose of the workshop, Latrice, is to really dig down deeper into just the question you just asked, which is, are the impacts along Lowry, along Washington,